Zionism is Jewish supremacy, an ethno-religious supremacist identity, an ideology with an principle of the outgroup. So the difference between Hamas and Israel is Israel behaves like ISIS. Hamas is fighting back. And Hamas is not just Hamas anyway. Hamas is the entirety of the Palestinian resistance. It's just called Hamas by everyone in the West and in general. It's like a catch-all term. As I was saying, a lot of people think like the average person's opinion is like close to mine or close to the squirrel account, like the average person in America's opinion. We're not having a conversation about what the truth is right now. Okay, we're having a conversation about like what the average American's assessment is. Okay, if you were to tell the average person, Democrat voter, non-Democrat voter, don't you think Bernie's a liberal Zionist because he's like, and therefore reactionary because he doesn't call what Israel's doing a genocide? They would look at you like you have 8 eyeballs. They would be like, what are you saying? To normies, Bernie Sanders and AOC as well are profoundly popular figures, especially Bernie. Okay. Bernie Sanders is a profoundly popular politician in the United States of America at a time when there is a tremendous amount of animosity directed righteously at politicians. Okay. The reality of the matter is, while the concern as far as Bernie refusing to say the truth about what Israel is doing and refusing to be a leader in this regard, I think that most normies probably look at Bernie and go, wow, he's really pushing the needle. He's really, he's really committed. That's part of the reason why they like him, because they think like adjusted to the average person's considerations and adjusted to the average person's opinion on members of Congress, he's above and beyond. And he's seen by normies as a positive figure, a positive force in American politics, unless they're like brain-rotted reactionaries. I don't know if this is true, though. I asked Beto to commit to an arms embargo in a full room in Kansas City, Missouri, and he refused. I disrupted. There was a lot of support. No. Well, that's different. We're not talking about Bernie Sanders. We're talking about Beto O'Rourke. This doesn't actually go against what I'm saying at all. Yeah, a liberal politician whose previous stances on Israel committing a genocide are unknown is, of course, going to draw a lot of cheers when someone actually says, you know, what's your situation with the arms embargo? Would you commit to an arms embargo? That's very different. You think Beto supporters are more liberal than Bernie's? I don't understand. No, I'm saying that the average person thinks what you're committing Beto O'Rourke to is what Bernie Sanders is already committed to. That's my point. Do you not get it? They already think Bernie's there. As a matter of fact, the only crowd where like a question that is somewhat antagonistic towards Bernie Sanders about, sorry, someone at the door. The only crowd where a somewhat antagonistic question directed towards Bernie in the direction of like, why aren't you more aggressive about Israel, would ironically be at a Bernie rally. But outside of a Bernie rally, like from my experience at least, like there are people who are far more radical than Bernie on the issue of Israel at the Bernie Sanders rallies. Outside of that, though, I think most people see Bernie as like the leading voice on anti-Israel sentiment. And they're wrong for thinking so. Gaia, place. Okay. Yedim çok güzel. Anne yanlış kapı. Orta kapıyı çek. Açtım anne. Oh my God. Down. What is this? The Zoran campaign is the future of leftist politics in this country and a blueprint on how to claw back control from both neoliberal conservatives and neoliberal elites alike. Except from liberal CIA Dems are done.
I mean, we've got a socialist candidate on the rise in New York City. Oh no, cheap groceries, quick! Send in the molester. And every day, more and more people are waking up to Israel's clear and obvious side in Palestine.
But look at this sea change. Now Democrats sympathize more with the Palestinians by 43 points. Oh my God, that is a change in the margin of 56 points over the course of just 8 years.
And let's be real, it was always destined to get here. The problem was that most people just were not aware of or educated on Israel's fascist Zionist project and their apartheid against the Palestinian people, which has been going on since 1948. But you can't exactly commit a live stream genocide and not have people become aware of exactly how vile and depraved your bullshit ideology is. Especially if your propaganda is dog shit. No, but please keep telling us Israel has the right to defend itself, how they're an important ally that must be protected, while Israel's Minister of National Security says shit like this.
What is this? Hey man, why are you so okay with supporting terrorists? I'm actually curious because it seems like you are cool with death and killing of innocents as long as they are against you. Wait, what? Do you think that I'm pro-Israel? Did you accidentally think that I was pro-Israel? What is happening? Wow. Last time this chatter spoke was in 10/10/2023. Let's match up their previous sentiments to whether or not Israel has a unique position in their heart, considering that they've been around this community for quite a while. Now, February 1st, 2023. Now, is there something unique that you guys can point to with this chatter's opinion pre-October 7 versus post-October 7? Let's take a look. Have fun dealing with the toxic children in your chat, molding over nothing, but these Zoomers wouldn't have anything to do with terminally online leftists. Shit's on them. American sock dems are far more imperialist than they understand with their dogma, trying to be pushed on other poorer countries. Military-industrial complex go burr. It's such a lame thing for the right to get mad at, and yet it's very colonist behavior. Every time I see Westerners try to push their morals on the East, all I see is imperialists. Love when the left has to nitpick every detail. Still not bad as a Reddit atheist. They are super goofy. Okay, if this person isn't actually saying I'm a Zionist and unironically thinking that I'm like pro-Israel, then this is the greatest whiplash that I've ever experienced. Okay? I'm going to be honest with you. I really hope this is like one of those guys who's a Maoist third worldist and he's actually saying, oh, Israel sucks, but let's be clear, but Hamas sucks too. It's like I hate both. Okay. No. Never mind. Hold on. Let me match up to... No, they are actually, an ashamed former pro-Israel supporter who's still a pro-Israel supporter, but he's too afraid to openly admit that to himself and to others. Because right here, let's look back at this. Hold on. Military-industrial complex go burr. It's such a lame thing for the right to get mad at. Yeah, it's very colonist behavior. Every time I see Westerners try to push their morals on the East, all I see is imperialists. American sock dems are far more imperialist than they understand with their dogma, trying to be pushed on other poorer countries. Love when the left has to nitpick every detail. Please don't mimic the clicker language from the LOU is rude. Lol, beware. Might cancel Hasan. I will stop the joke. Okay. Military intel says not balloon. Why refuted? Balloons have propulsion that you can see. These didn't have any. Interesting. So, disparaging the xenophobic language coming from the media, talking about the colonial behavior exhibited by social democrats, Western chauvinists alike. Seems like this is a person who is actually very invested in foreign policy. Hasan, how dare you? That drone had a family and was American-blooded. Hasan, you don't understand that drone had feelings, and we don't need to speak bad about it. You can defend the moderate drone planes. You need their votes. Wow, seemingly very anti-war. Almost an anti-imperialist, as a matter of fact. That's so strange. But then, this person who is one step removed from using Maoist standard English on 10/10/2023. I wasn't live on October 7th, of course. I was live on October 8th, 2023, 2 days after my first stream on 10/10/2023. This guy comes in and reveals his final message in the chat, only to come back around this time. So what happened to this chatter who kept talking about, correctly, mind you, the colonialist values exhibited by even the social fascists of the social democratic left in the Western world. I wonder what took place. I don't even know who unbanned this person, but it's fine. I don't have any issues with unbanning people like this. Is it perhaps that this person who fancies themselves to be an anti-imperialist found one imperial project that they hold near and dear, only to come back 2 years after the fact, after 23 months of unlimited settler colonial violence inflicted upon the indigenous population of Palestinians, does he still try to relitigate his wrong opinion? And instead of having the decency to say, hey, man, you were right, I was wrong, I have the capacity to feel shame, I'm here to say, my bad, my mistake, or not even say anything at all, okay? I get it. I get this is a bit both sides nonsense, but it was a crazy time. 10/17/2024. So 1 year after the fact, he apologized and subsequently got unbanned, only to still relitigate the same shit. Still the same shit. How can you tell me with any sincerity that you understand colonial inflicted, not only just like the direct boots on the ground, not only the drone warfare that you talked about, that you criticized, sarcastically, mind you, but then when Israel does it to the Palestinians as a very important part of American imperialism in the region, you think the people that respond back militarily are the bad guys? How in the ever-loving did we arrive at that position? And it wasn't just Hamas chatter, because Israel is so clear and so obviously the villain in the story that you guys were like, yeah, I think the Iraq war was good, brother, but goddamn, what Israel's doing is a bridge too far. And you still, as someone who was on the exact diametrical opposite of that position, cannot get yourself to maybe realize how. Because no, don't say Islamophobia, chatters. Don't say Islamophobia. Because if he was that Islamophobic, he would also say, well, the drone warfare is also, you know, kind of appropriate. Because Islamophobic liberals always said, well, don't you think drone warfare is a more surgical way to deal with these genuine problems of fundamentalist radicals that need to be dealt with violently? That's what Islamophobic liberals say. This chatter is literally beyond the Islamophobic liberal position when it comes to criticizing drone warfare, when it comes to even Westerners demanding that colonial subjects, victims of empire, reflect their immediate values without even ever offering them the same freedoms that Westerners have had and had enjoyed to be able to have their own domestic civil struggles. So he recognizes all that shit. So how did that happen? And this question is not just for this chatter, but it's good for that chatter to actually address it. You don't have to respond to it. You don't have to write anything in the chat. Just ask yourself that question. How did I arrive at this position? Because I've never met him who's like, listen, dude, this is the I'm anti-imperialist except for Israel guy. Now that right there, chatters, that is a unique position. Because I've never met him who is anti-imperialist except for Israel. Okay? That's a way more unique position than like pro-Ukraine versus and pro-Israel guys who are just like NatSec liberals. Way more unique than like Z-pushers who are pro-Russia and pro-Palestine. Way more unique than the average Russian and average Israelis politics, which is pro-Russia and pro-Israel, or the average Republican, I guess. This man is against imperial conquest for everybody but Israel. Yep, there it is. I already know the answer to this question. Yes, you have family in Israel, so you're biased. So how can people in this chat who live in Israel as Jews living in Israel, how can members of the Knesset that have literally been a part of the IDF and then became conscientious objectors have a more honest position on this than you, anti-imperialist dumb, living in the Western, living in the core of empire with simply familial relatives, with a family association in Israel? Shame on you. Shame on you. There are anti-Zionist Jews in Israel that are in this community. That are conscientious objectors, anti-Zionist Jews in Israel that are demonstrating, that are putting their bodies on the line to try and protect Palestinians in the West Bank. And you're out here being like, sorry, I have a familial association, which causes me to just brick my brain and everything else that I've downloaded in here, exhibiting your own personal bias. And also demonstrating it by literally 23 months into a genocide, demonstrating that bias without even feeling embarrassed by it. It took you a year to apologize for the both sides' position, said things were hot. And then what? Months later, you're still back at it again. Clearly, you are refusing to learn. I went through a serious whiplash. You can shame all you want. It's called growth over years and changing opinions. No, dumbass. We're making fun of you for not changing your opinions. Your core, okay? Your fundamentals are busted if you don't understand how Israel set the stage for October 7 to happen, how America set the stage for October 7 to happen. That's the problem. You are fundamentally at odds here, and you act like you are actually unironically embarrassed by the previous position that you held, and yet the resentment still carried over. How do you not get it? Yeah, I say we leave the Middle East entirely. They all suck. I went through a serious whiplash on October 7. I saw people supporting Hamas, but then I saw Israel went way off the rails. Yeah, you misunderstood fundamentally how October 7 happened, okay? The reason that people were, from your estimation, quote unquote, supporting Hamas was because they were simply more knowledgeable than you about what Israel had done prior. People like myself didn't come out and were like, oh, thank God Hamas did this. Of course not, because many understood exactly what was coming. But the people that were falsely saying like, oh, you support October 7, you love October 7, people like myself, the reason why we were presented as such was because we were aware of the conditions that were set before, far before October 7, from the inception of the Israeli state, even before then, but certainly in the aftermath of the Nakba, 80 years of colonial oppression, domination of the indigenous population, ethnic cleansing, sieges that took place over and over again, more land grabs, more belligerence demonstrated to all neighbors who are unfortunate enough to be around the settler colonial entity that is chock full of people that are primed to kill all Arabs in the region while still simultaneously claiming to be victims. It's ridiculous. So if you understand how Israel went a little out of hand and, after October 7, well, there's still a lot more room to grow in your perspective because they didn't just go a little out of hand. They used October 7 to finalize their genocide, an ethnic cleansing campaign that has continued for 80 years on a slow burn and much faster at times of sieges. What the Israeli government calls mowing the lawn. That's it. I just don't understand the support for Hamas when they are also evil too. Are we just picking lesser of two evils? I was wrong about Israel. I own up to that. I'm genuinely curious. What about Hamas is not a terrorist group? Let me tell you, okay? Hamas is in charge of an emancipatory movement. It is a nationalist movement for Palestinians. 15 million. 10 million of them, 15 million total, 10 million of them living under, or 5 million of them living under Israeli occupation, 10 million of them living in diaspora. Okay? A stateless people who were offered a state, as a matter of fact, who were supposed to have a state even after it was ripped apart in half by a settler colonial entity with a Jewish supremacist identity. Zionism is Jewish supremacy, an ethno-religious supremacist identity, an ideology with an exterminationist principle, an extermination of the outgroup. So the difference between Hamas and Israel is Israel behaves like ISIS. Hamas is fighting back. And Hamas is not just Hamas anyway. Hamas is the entirety of the Palestinian resistance. It's just called Hamas by everyone in the West and in general. It's like a catch-all term. Whenever people say AIPAC, they don't just mean AIPAC. They mean all of the Israeli lobbying efforts, for example. If you, after 23 months of genocide, even though you recognize that your opinion is shifted on what Israel is doing and you still shelter yourself from seeing the truth by claiming, oh, well, they get a little out of hand. Genocide is not getting a little out of hand. Okay. Then you obviously have not taken enough initiative on this journey. I think billionaires holding all the wealth that run Hamas suck. Yes. Oh my God. We're still talking about billionaires own. Oh my God, brother. Who are you talking about? Israel has assassinated every single person in the leadership structure of Hamas at this point. What the do you mean the billionaires? They've killed all their family members. They're doing a genocide. Even if they literally were wealth hoarders, which, by the way, there's not a lot of evidence for, with the exception of like a couple New York Post articles that get choice quotes from Benjamin Netanyahu's favorite think tank, the FDD, Foundation for Defending Democracies, which is, of course, not doing that at all. It's just there to defend Israel. But even if that was true, that doesn't change the dynamic of Israel's genocide and ethnic cleansing, okay? What do you mean? What are you trying to say? Like, Israel's actually doing anti-capitalist action by assassinating the billionaires to what? Redistribute the wealth? Is that what Israel is doing? You're only presenting this because you saw, again, Zionist talking points. And not only that, but also there are plenty of issues with Hamas's governing structure. There are plenty of issues that Gazans have with their own government, okay? None of that matters. None of that matters when we talk about what Israel is doing to the Palestinians. It is nothing, okay? Ridiculous. Hasan, Hamas kills people. Nothing against the people, but Hamas does stuff I can't get behind. Is that so bad? Or are you of the opinion that it's the only way? I'm of the opinion that if you push people to a corner over and over again and enact 80 years of domination and ethnic superiority and religious superiority over them, then yes, some of those people that were orphaned by the colonial entity are going to fight back militarily. What the do you think people are going to do? Especially when you leave them with no options. One must understand how Hamas actually came to power. One must understand the PLO. You have to understand the history of Palestinian resistance and its evolution to try and comprehend how we got here, to try and comprehend how Palestinians got here. Even though chat's being kind of rude, at least I'm learning and getting actual feedback. Thank you. I don't know enough to have an opinion. I just know it was hell and we did a lot of evil. And I appreciate you actually explaining it's not just being rude. Yes, I can see you were frustrated, but if I didn't say anything, how could I learn new things? I don't know. You don't have to come in here and say, why are you okay with supporting terrorists? I'm actually curious because it seems like you're cool with the death and killing of innocents as long as they are against you. Do you feel like that's something that you were actually, do you feel like that first statement right there was one that made it seem as though you wanted to learn? Why? Why do you come in here with such rudeness, with such hostility? Also, how many times since October 7 and far before that as well, but how many videos do I have on this matter? How many times have I written on this issue? Okay? You could have just searched it on your own. You could have just gone to a YouTube video that I've done at any given point, you know? It's the way that you present these questions that is the problem. And then doubling down on it. You heard me. I said what I said. Israel sucks. Let's be clear, but Hamas sucks too. I hate both. You don't. You clearly don't hate both. I'm not the only person who could have taught you about this, for the record. You don't want to hear it from me. There are Jewish Israeli anti-Zionists that you could hear from. There are historians I mean, Zach Foster's a great example. He's a PhD at Princeton. He is Jewish himself, and he is a scholar on the history of Palestinian resistance, specifically Hamas. What is this? He's rage baiting you. He's doing this. Confidently drop an incorrect statement and make logical statements to defend it. They will lose their shit trying to correct you. Make it seem like you are willing to learn, but continue to revert. Once you feel like you lost them, make it seem like you understand them better, but not accidentally taking a different... How do you rage bait a smart person? Once you feel like you lost them, make it seem like you understand them better, but not accidentally taking it a different incorrect direction. I don't think that person is actually doing that. I think that person literally came in hot, wanted to rage bait, and then realized that his previous chatter, his previous statements in the chat were readily available to me, realized that it was actually embarrassing, that he had this very clear-cut bias, and now is going through the initiative after being caught of at least saying like, okay, I'm learning. I'm on a journey to learn. I'm not going to cast aside this person and immediately say that he is not going to have a genuine change of behavior. I hope he does. And I hope this was still educational for those who are maybe not as in tune with the history of Palestinian resistance, for example. What is this? I mean, follows denims and shit. A lot of this. I don't know what's going on here. I don't think this person is like an acolyte. I think they're just an anime fan with a gooner anime fan who loves VTubers a lot, who I think just genuinely are just personally biased. In any case, is that wrong? Is what I was told? Yes, they're dead now, but they were. Isn't that wrong? I'm willing to admit I was lied to and change my mind. First of all, I'm telling you, it doesn't even matter if they're billionaires because Israel's still doing a genocide. But no, of course, you have to take a little bit of scrutiny to whatever kind of evidence that Israel is presenting and pro-Israeli think tanks are presenting about Hamas or whatever the Hamas leadership. Here, I'll give you one of the best examples. Yahya Sinwar, the architect of October 7, right? Yahya Sinwar. Yahya Sinwar was a part of the internal security structure within Hamas initially, before he became like the leader, basically, of Hasan brigades. Yahya Sinwar, born in a refugee camp, of course, as is the case with every single Palestinian resistance leader and every single member of the Palestinian resistance, born in a refugee camp. One must ask the question, why? How did that happen? Anyway, spent most of his life in Israeli prison, okay? Learned Hebrew, and translated a lot of Israeli works into Arabic, okay? Yahya Sinwar, presented as this incredibly barbaric, anti-Semitic guy. Actually, that's not even the case. I feel like because of his like friendship with the Israeli dentist when he was in prison and stuff, has actually offered unique insight into his background, even in Israeli society. But he's like the arch villain of Israel, right? And throughout the entire process post-October 7, Israeli officials kept repeatedly saying Yahya Sinwar is actually chained into is hiding outside of Gaza. He escaped through the tunnels like a rat, or that he actually had all of the Israeli babies chained to his body, as though that would stop Israel from assassinating a Palestinian resistance leader. Get the fuck out of here. But they kept saying it over and over again. Oh, he's feeding his belly in the tunnel system as Palestinians starve above, right? All of that was a lie, right? How did he die? He died fighting. He died on pure accident, for the record. Israel did not know that they were actually targeting Yahya Sinwar. They were just doing the same shit that they do every goddamn day. They shelled him with a tank, and then they sent in a drone. And only after, a day later, when those diaper brigade cowards were finally able to go into the building that they'd blown up, did they find him, his body. In his pocket, he had like, what, Mentos. That's it. He was also starving. He died fighting. So what? That was a lie. I thought he was supposed to be in Qatar, right? That's what Israel was saying. So what the f do you believe when they say, oh, all these guys, Ismail Haniyeh, also in Tehran, leader of the Politburo, has nothing to do with Al-Qassam brigades, right? These are two totally separate groups at this point, okay? In charge of Hamas's civil governance affairs is the principal negotiator talking to Israel throughout this ceasefire process that never came about. They killed him in Tehran. They had already killed most of his family deliberately. So why the f would you believe whatever Israel has to say about Hamas's leadership? The most interesting aspect of Yahya Sinwar's death, his execution, his martyrdom, was that Israel thought this would be humiliating for the Palestinians. What Israel didn't realize was that the rest of the world was so disgusted with their actions that they actually elevated Yahya Sinwar's status by showing that they had lied about him over and over again. This has been a dramatic miscalculation for Israel and Zionists in general. They always, whenever they funded Hamas, for example, as a counterbalance against more secular, revolutionary, socialist-aligned Palestinian liberation groups, they thought that those guys would be just as corrupt as Israeli politicians are. They thought Hamas would be more so invested in completely controlling the Palestinian population for their own benefit, for their own desires. They never thought that Hamas would bring about a force of all of the Palestinian resistance together. They did not think that Hamas would consistently advocate to release people like Marwan Barghouti, who would, if he was ever to be released from Israeli prison, would become the singular leader for all Palestinians. They never thought that Hamas would actually argue to release politicians, like Palestinian resistance figures that are actually antagonistic to Hamas. That's the big problem. They thought they could fund Hamas because they're reactionary, fundamentalist, Islamist guys. They could just say, oh, these guys are just like crazy ISIS-style Muslims. They thought they could present the Palestinian resistance forces like that. And whenever Hamas militarily resisted against Israel's incursions in the West Bank, then they could just go back and control how high the fires burn. That's what Benjamin Netanyahu's statement was. I entirely agree with you, but I feel like so many are not ready to have those talking points yet, thinking of my boomers at the moment. I know, but I have never shied away from saying those things. You know, I think you have to treat people like they're not stupid. And it would be as though I'm treating you like a moron if I were to say, what do you expect people to do after they have been brutalized for 80 plus years? When I ask someone that question, a lot of people make that decision in their minds. If they don't see Palestinians as human beings, they say, well, you know, the way they resisted was still barbaric. If you push people in a corner and you tell them that the only way you can get out of this is to fight back, they're going to fight back. Ultimately, every single thing that I mention here is not bias. It's just an accurate reflection of historical events that have taken place. Okay? I do not have a dog in this fight beyond emancipation for Palestinians, sovereignty for Palestinians. Okay? That's what I care about. If they got their freedom, if they got their sovereignty and they chose not to elect Hamas as their leadership, then great, who cares? You know? Who cares? It's not up to me, it's up to them. If they choose Hamas, then they choose Hamas. Once again, it's not up to us to make this assessment. Ridiculous. Anyway, I hope this was educational for you, chatter. I don't know, because it seems like I would say that I'm okay with being shamed if it means I learn, but also okay. Why does Israel say I can't boycott them if I'm a teacher? No country should have that power. To me, that's not okay, and it's grounds for cutting ties. If you could make them reflect their politics, would you? I mean, my politics are my politics because I think it's better for the overall public good. So yeah, it would be awesome. It's like asking me if you could make the American government reflect your politics, would you? Yeah, the answer is yes. I don't know if you read it, but the chatter had family in Israel during October 7th. That's why they snapped. I know. But if that chatter was in here, when I was interviewing Minister of the Knesset, Ofer Kasif, like what, 3 days after he chirped at me on like 13/10, you know, or I mean 10/13/2023, he would have probably had a much better understanding of what the fuck is actually going on instead of leaning into his biases because of his like family relationships. Y'all, the rage bait tweet was true. Why are we getting distracted? Because I think it's still a productive conversation to have. Shut the fuck up. Okay? That's why. Sometimes, even when I get rage baited, I try to turn that into a productive incident. And this, I think, is productive. It's not even productive just because he's going to change his mind. Only time will tell if he actually does. And that's his own situation. But there are plenty of other people who might not have learned all of this stuff. Because I talk about this every day, but sometimes you don't hear me say it, you know? There's always someone who's learning new things in here. Is 34 minutes away from his record of longest running one guy? No, not even close. Hey, place. It's crazy. People look at Hamas as this evil, scary group, but any form of media they grew up with showed there's the same resistance thing. Would you call the Jedis a terrorist group? I mean, yeah, to explain it to Americans, you got to be like, imagine a Jedi. Like, no, man. The reason why they see them as like scary, evil people is because of racism. They just think like Arabs are not human. They're like a parasitic force that's just like responding to stimuli. Okay? Only after the dust is settled and many decades have passed do liberals finally come to the conclusion that maybe they weren't these like evil guys that we thought they were. Okay? The example that obviously comes to mind is literally Star Wars. George Lucas presented the Viet Cong as the good guys in Star Wars. America was the Empire, the bad guys in Star Wars. How many people that watch Star Wars learned that lesson? Very few. No, they didn't win their election because they had Israeli state support. That's literally untrue. Hamas was supported by Israel after they won their election. Okay? And even then, there was a different purpose for it. The reason why they won their election, and you're wrong, and I'll explain to you exactly why. The reason why they won their election was because of the collapse of the so-called peace process. Okay, the back and forth negotiations conducted by Arafat up until that very moment, had only led to more incursions and more expansion in Palestinian territory in the West Bank. There was a contiguous statehood offered to the Palestinians as a direct consequence of the stalemate that was presented when Palestinians tried to negotiate with Israel. They never actually had an even partnership in the negotiations process, and the United States of America constantly fucked them over. The Palestinian Authority, led by Fatah at the time, was also seen as understandably seen by Palestinians as a part of the Israeli security apparatus, even though there had been times when they'd obviously resisted against the Israeli military in like the Second Intifada, for example. But ultimately, Palestinians were fed up. There's also obviously a successful resistance force that the Palestinians had seen, a resistance force that actually was able to successfully push Israel out of their borders. You had the successes of Hezbollah, and in the aftermath of the collapse of the fucking so-called peace process, Palestinians were looking for a party that was not actually seen as collaborators with the Israeli project. Okay? When Arafat went into the peace process, he was unimaginably popular. Okay? Insanely popular. Everyone was like, this is fucking amazing. We're finally going to have statehood. By the end of that fucking process, they were like, holy shit. This thing was dangled in front of us, and it amounted to nothing. It amounted to death, and it amounted to destruction. Just filed an FBI report on you, or I'm going to do it again tomorrow. You're a fucking baboon, chatter. Okay? You are a fucking baboon. Do you understand? File 1 million FBI reports on me. I am not saying anything that is illegal, you fucking moron. You fucking donkey. You scared little bitch, you fucking coward. Suck my dick. File one every day. You think the FBI doesn't know half the shit I say? What are you, fucking stupid? Imagine like having an academic conversation about the history of resistance movements as it pertains to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and this stupid fucking idiot is like, oh, I'm telling the feds. What do you think they're gonna do? Learn a thing or two about Hamas? Is that what you think is gonna happen here? You fucking idiot. You spineless, immoral little cowardly worm. Oh, these things are scaring me. Please, FBI, come and get him, please. Dumbass. I can't believe it. Anyway, as I was saying, in the aftermath of the collapse of the fucking so-called peace process, Palestinians wanted an uncorruptible force. That's why Hamas won the plurality. And then after that, America, which had previously facilitated the elections to begin with, that allowed the elections to take place to begin with, realized that their guys lost. So when Fatah lost, they tried to do a coup, and they failed because Hamas actually fought back, and they took over complete control over the Gaza Strip. That is the story of Hamas. From 1978, when it was a Muslim Brotherhood cutout that was an Islamic charity, all the way to a militant resistance organization that evolved its tactics in resisting against the Israeli state, going from simply resisting non-violently and non-militarily to resisting militarily against military targets and police targets, to then actually, in the aftermath of the massacre, the Baruch Goldstein massacre, changing its tactics to actually directly killing civilians as well. Now, you might think it's a misstep to do that to Israeli society. I certainly do as well. There are plenty of people who have actually studied successful forms of resistance that the Western world would call terrorists. And they also sometimes are not of the same mind on this. Okay, but that doesn't matter because those things happened, and it is not on me to sit here and be like, well, I don't know, they should have done this, they should have done that. Palestinians have exhausted all matter of resistance, non-violent resistance, violence resistance that only targets police and the military, and violent resistance that also targets civilians as well. None of it has done anything, and every single time Israel's responded with unimaginable asymmetrical violence against the entire Palestinian population. And we are now watching the last part of that unfold with open Holocaust, with the open ethnic cleansing, the live streamed Holocaust of Palestinian children every single day. So if you still have some kind of fucking confusion here, you go, oh, I don't understand, like both sides are bad. Well, then you're fucking stupid, you know? I'm sorry. You're just a stupid person. That's it. Yes, my entire family is here. Okay, chat. That's why you can hear them in the background, because they're having a conversation right there. What do you want me to do? This is why I bought a home, okay? So I could host my family whenever they wanted to. And sometimes they're here while I'm talking about the history of Hamas and Palestinian resistance movements. Anyway, I can't believe there's still motherfuckers in here that are like, I'm telling the FBI on you, dude. What are they gonna do? Come suck my dick? Shut the fuck up. Do you think I'm stupid? Do you think I'm not saying anything illegal. No matter how hard you wish, it should be illegal to accurately reflect on events that have unfolded throughout history. As it stands currently, thank God, it's not. These are the exact same motherfuckers that will then cynically turn around and be like, try that in China.